Hey, this is Chuck Marshall with Loudhailer, and I'm talking with Chris Naughton of Winterfylleth. Chris, how you doing, man?
Good, thank you. Glad to be here.
Excellent. It's a real pleasure of mine to be able to talk with you. First order of business, though, is how are you and the rest of the band coping with the pandemic? Are you guys in a lockdown like we are in the United States, or how is that going?
Yeah, we are indeed. I think it's going okay. I mean, obviously, it's a huge contrast to normal life for many people,
Mm,
and the same for us, really. It's kind of changed how our days go, I think, and it's meant that we've had to kind of change the way we live for a little while. So
right.
it's a crazy time, but I'm hoping that we can use it to our advantage and spend some time on family and spend some time with our kids and things like that, where we wouldn't usually have the chance to do that. So you can find some good in it, as well as obviously the horrible kind of pandemic that's going on around us.
Right. So the Reckoning Dawn is coming out on May 8th. Beyond the typical like interview cycle, do you guys have anything planned special like for online so that people can embrace the new album?
Well, we had a new video come out yesterday, so that was launched on a few partner sites, and it was also launched on our kind of socials. So we're trying to kind of get people to have a listen to that and hopefully get into the album, um, a week ahead of time.
Uh-huh.
We've also got some other video content coming up this week. So we've got some playthrough videos, and we've got a video on technique and I guess a tutorial as to how to play like Winterfylleth, if that sort of thing interests you.
Yeah.
Um, and so I guess we find ourselves in a strange period of time in the sense that we can't just go out and play 20 shows, and we can't go and tour around Europe or the UK and kind of bring the music out to people.
Yeah.
We're sort of relying on kind of capturing people in different spaces, I guess. And maybe now's the time to do that. Maybe it isn't. I don't know. But I know bands have been cancelling their releases or putting them back until a few months' time. So we decided not to do that, and yeah, I guess maybe give people something new to listen to while they're stuck at home, or a bit of hope, or some enjoyment for a few hours while the rest of life kind of carries on around us.
Yeah. Speaking of the new album, I had the great fortune to get to listen to it. Before it's been released, and it's fantastic. I got to tell you, I love every song. Fantastic.
Oh wow, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, just the brutal heaviness of it, and the layered compositions. I mean, it's just so attractive to me. Like I mentioned, like every song's just superb, and I'm wondering which one do you enjoy the most, and why?
It's a good question, actually. I don't know if I've thought about that. Well, I think the one that galvanized us all the most was the title track, and that's why we wanted to release that one.
uh,
Um, but it's strange, the more you listen to the album, and I guess the more time you get to spend with it, as we have done over the months, making it and mixing it and all those sorts of things.
yeah,
Uh, I think The Reckoning Dawn, the title track, has got one of the kind of most triumphant moments that we've ever written in the sense of that kind of huge sort of solo and epic section in the middle.
yeah, yeah,
But equally, I think that the second single, Misdeeds of Faith, shows a really different side to the band, a much more kind of direct and brutal side, and then we sort of
yeah.
mix that with some of the kind of choral vocals. But then I think one of the songs that's probably going to pop up for a lot of people as maybe a personal favorite is perhaps the third track, Absorbed in Fire.
Oh yeah,
I think that one with the kind of acoustic intro, and then it goes into quite a kind of a melodic black metal section, and then there's a few kind of twists and turns in that song that are maybe not as typical for a Winterfylleth song, perhaps as people might come to appreciate. So
hmm
I think that's a really great one. Maybe that's a standout for me. Equally, I think maybe one of the songs that will take people a while to kind of get through the skin of is the fifth track, A Greatness Undone.
yeah,
I think that's a excuse me. I think that's a really interesting, I guess up and down, layered, kind of moving composition that's probably less typical for us than some of the things we've ever written in the past, and I hope I guess a point of interest for people. So it's an interesting one. Whatever day you ask me that on, I might feel a little bit differently about it. But I guess the point for me is that we tried really hard to make sure that there was no filler on the album,
yeah,
and that we were really critical of ourselves and each other. that we weren't just putting stuff on there just to kind of pad the album out, and that every song had to kind of have, a great moment in it, or some great, great riff, or some great melodies that kind of make it more than just it being a track that's featured on the album in amongst a few other good songs.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think you've accomplished that for sure. And it's kind of funny you led right into the next question, which is, one of my favorite songs on The Reckoning Dawn is A Greatness Undone. I mean, the emotions from triumph to like this mournful loss. It's that song to me is just fantastic, and I'm wondering if you can share what's the story behind that song and what inspired its creation.
I mean, the lyric is quite nuanced, but essentially the broad idea of A Greatness Undone is I guess is like greed and power, hungriness. Mm-hmm. So it kind of speaks to this. Well, I suppose this undercurrent that I think we all know exists in society, that we're kind of being controlled by somebody.
Yeah.
And that, be that kind of through the governments, or through the kind of, like financial means, through corporations, or through kind of, obviously all being sort of slaves to having to have a wage every month to kind of pay our way, and, all of those sort of things that subvert humanity. And I guess, it speaks to this idea that there's generally always somebody trying to profit off everybody else, and trying to kind of get to the top of the pile for sinister means.
Yeah.
And I don't just mean that in terms of like competition. Like, obviously we're kind of naturally and biologically geared up to compete with one another, I think.
Yep.
But it's more pathological than that, I think. It's that need to control, as though somehow you are the kind of the benchmark for what is right and true in the world, and somehow that you are the kind of voice of the people that knows what they want or whatever,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think that the song is almost about how people are exploited by other people, and how we're exploited in kind of obvious and non-obvious ways, and that we should be aware of that. And I guess the idea is just to sort of, I guess, like poking holes in that, and trying to sort of say that you if you have a kind of, I guess, a reckoning of your mind, and you become aware of these things, then at least you can kind of do everything in your power to sort of temper the impact that those things can have on you.
Right.
So it's broadly around that area, essentially.
Yeah, I love it. It's great, and it's like you mentioned, very thematic for throughout human history. There's been that thread of someone trying to subvert someone else for just their own personal gain, as opposed to actually trying to do something better for everyone else involved. Yeah. But
I mean, even look at stupid examples during this pandemic. People who've hoarded like 17,000 bottles of
yes.
Hand sanitizer or whatever.
Right.
Just stuff like that. Why be that person?
Right.
And all you want to do is profit off everybody else in a moment of international turmoil.
I know. Have people in the UK been hoarding toilet paper as well? Because that's been a big thing here in the United States.
Yeah. I don't know why. I mean, maybe people think that rather than getting respiratory symptoms, I think everyone thought they were going to shit themselves.
Right.
I don't know. Maybe everyone just thought we're going to be locked down for weeks on end. Perhaps let's hoard this stuff. But
yeah,
to be honest, I bet there's people who are going to have it for years. It's going to go stale probably, and
right.
Get rot in the toilet and really use it. So who knows? But I mean that just shows how much we're the media frenzy kicked up a fuss with people, and how they almost like pit us against ourselves with all this kind of misinformation that occurs in the world. So it doesn't surprise me that people reacted in that way, because people are stupid and reactive, aren't they? And en masse, and you have to kind of really get through to people in other ways to kind of talk sense to them. But it clearly wasn't handled well at all by any government, which is why people acted stupidly.
That's true. The Reckoning Dawn is actually the first time that I've actually heard Winterfylleth, and so I'm hooked. I went and dove into your catalog. As I mentioned, there's this kind of a classical approach you guys use to your songwriting, but also heavy, brutal, and you can definitely, when you look at your whole catalogs, feel that evolution. I've in some respects, when I listen to some of your music, I thought of like a band that is dear to my heart, and that's At the Gates. Not so much the some of the Swedish elements, but just that kind of classical approach. Anyway, where I was going with that is there's so many genres that we try to paint a band into and label them. Do you feel Winterfylleth really fits into the black metal category, or do you guys think of yourselves as beyond that?
It's a good question. It's a funny thing with genres. Like lots of bands say they don't like to be pigeonholed, and I guess maybe that you don't. But our intent was to set out and make a black metal band, I suppose, but make it relevant to us. We
Mm-hmm.
aren't from 1980s, early 1990s Scandinavia. We're guys who came along 20, 30 years later from the British Isles.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess for me that we had to, I guess for better or worse in some people's opinion, we had to make it a bit different and make it relevant to what we wanted to talk about. So because we weren't talking about like anti-Christianity or nihilism or Satan or whatever, a lot of those early topics were about in some of those bands,
Yeah.
or anti-death metal or whatever they were talking about.
Right.
We had to make it real for the environment that we live in and for the people that we are. So consequently, our music has been about I guess the veneration of folklore, interesting points of history, I guess how that relates to the kind of modern social narrative, and also things about like the environment and the natural world and all those sorts of things. So they don't really sit very nicely with lo-fi kind of, I guess like intense monotonal black metal.
Mm-hmm.
They require a level of emotion and grandiosity, I guess, that some of those early bands actively wanted to steer clear of. So while I do think we're a black metal band, I guess subgenres have emerged, and people seem to sort of call us atmospheric black metal, which I don't necessarily hate, because I do think we try and bring atmosphere and emotion into the music. But
Yeah.
we obviously started off calling ourselves kind of English heritage black metal, but people get the wrong idea about stuff like that, and people really have really funny relationships with things like heritage. So
Yeah.
it's something that that we don't want to shy away from, because we like the idea of talking about history and personal connections to the landscape and to the country and to all those sorts of things. But
Uh-huh.
I think we live in a world where people have an uncomfortable relationship with some of those things as well. So it's an interesting thing to kind of challenge people on their opinions about that, and show them that it can be a thing of beauty and not a thing of division, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of landscapes, I actually the artwork that you guys use is spectacular. I really like the current album's landscape, or artwork. Previous albums, same thing. It's these kind of stark, beautiful landscapes. I've been to Scotland, and it kind of reminds me of areas of the Highlands and stuff. So I'm curious, where do those images come from? Are they actually photographs, or are they places you guys visit, or what?
Most of the album covers are from quite near where we live, and some of them are a little bit further away. The new album is in the Peak District. Is it the Peak District or the Lake District? I don't think.
Yeah.
No, it's the Peak District. I think.
Okay.
The Peak District, and we live on the edge of the Peak District. Just a few of us do. But there's maybe like 6 or 7 major national parks in the UK that are kind of forested areas of kind of extraordinary natural beauty, however they describe it. And we live next to one of them, which is the Peak District. So the first album cover with a castle on it that goes to heritage, that's done in a place called Castleton, which is a really like nice little village that's kind of out in at the sort of almost like the entrance into the Peak District.
Okay.
They call it the gateway to the Dark Peak, around here, as it's the kind of the sort of I guess the towns and villages that are sort of on the way into there.
Yeah.
Like it's some kind of gates to hell or something. Do you know what I mean? It becomes sort of this massive natural park
Right.
as you kind of drive further that way. The second album is a landscape picture of one of the lakes in the Lake District, which is a famous area of the UK. It's one called Ullswater, which is one of the big naturally occurring lakes there. The third album, Threnody Triumph, is of Snowdonia National Park, which is in the north of Wales. The fourth album, Divination of Antiquity, that's of Great Gable in the Lake District. and Wastwater, which is the lake that's at the base of. Um, the fifth album is of uh, of the sort of area around one of our songs called A Valley Thick with Oaks. This place near where we live, called the Snake Pass.
Uh-huh.
The sixth album, the acoustic album, that's of a place called Sycamore Gap, which is in the northeast of England, and is this kind of famous one single tree that's a sycamore tree that sits between this enormous valley that kind of is near Hadrian's Wall, which is a famous kind of
Yeah.
famous sort of site in England. And I think the new album actually is in the Lake District. I think actually it's near the site where we did the fourth album cover, which is Great Gable. It's not the Peak District at all. I was wrong. So yeah, that was it. That was a really nice one taken at dawn by this lady called Kathy Medcalf, and we were really keen to have that because I think it really epitomised that idea of, you know, a new dawn, kind of change coming,
Right.
And also how the light hits the landscape gives that amazing golden color, and that really helps us with the aesthetic of the album, the kind of gold print, the yellow vinyl, you know,
Yeah.
that sort of stuff.
Yeah, yeah, it's fantastic. I'm curious. You've mentioned that the landscape inspires the music. When you guys are actually in the process of writing, how does that come about? Do you think of a lyrical content that you want to write music to, or do you think of the music first and then try to paint a lyrical picture on top of it?
Yeah, usually that. We don't tend to sort of do the lyrics until after most of the music is finished. So it's just a personal preference. I think some bands find it easy to do certain ways and some to do others. For me, I always like to have the concept in my head, and I like to have an album title before we start working on an album.
Yeah.
And for me, that kind of galvanizes the idea of what the album's going to become. So originally, actually, this album was going to be called The Reckoning of Time, but then that didn't feel like exactly quite the right sort of flavor of what we wanted to capture. So we then sort of opted for The Reckoning Dawn, which was a kind of more natural thing, and also I think people kind of understand more the idea that, you know, I guess attacks start at dawn, change comes at new light. You know, the kind of the dark being defeated by the light and all that sort of stuff. They're very kind of conceptual images that conjure lots of different but similar kind of sentiments, I guess.
Yeah.
So we had that concept, and then we wrote the songs, and then lyrically, you know, it speaks to similar kind of topics that we've touched on over the years, but it's a bit more focused on the idea of change, I guess, and of there being some kind of, I guess, physical or mental reckoning that needs to take place within people to kind of, you know, to cure some of the things that we're talking about, like greed, or like, you know, the idea of the crazy things that people do in the name of their faith. Hence the track "Misdeeds of Faith."
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, I was just that and some things kind of follow along that track of change, I guess, and pointing out the oddities that exist in the world that people just sort of go along with.
Yeah, well, and like I mentioned before, that you couldn't have been more on time. I mean, the Reckoning Dawn is like surrealistically fitting with the current times of change and upheaval that are happening all around us. And I mean, it's just that the timing couldn't have been more perfect. I'm curious about, though, with the change that's going to occur, you know, with everything we do for a period of time. Do you think that is going to change the way the band approaches writing your music?
I don't know if it'll change how we write our music necessarily. When you say that, do you mean in terms of us being allowed to be within physical proximity of one another to do so, or do you mean?
No, I was thinking more of
reaction to it.
Yeah, a reaction to the world change in total.
I don't think so. I think we kind of, by our seventh album, kind of know what Winterfylleth is, and the kind of way we write. I do think, however, that it will maybe or maybe requires us to kind of think about how we bring that music to people in a different way. And I guess I don't quite know what that means just yet, but you know, because we're releasing an album in this time period, and without some of the usual channels to kind of bring it to people, then I guess we're almost writing that story as we go along. So it's an interesting one to be part of, and I guess that's why we wanted to bring the album out as well. Like I said, because it's I don't know whether it's a good thing or a bad thing for it to be associated with this period of time, but it certainly might be memorable for some people and hold a strange sentiment for people because of that. So
Yeah.
what can you do? You just have to try, don't you?
Right. Well, and yeah, I think the title fits because it's a reckoning dawn, and we will forge on. So I like it.
I hope so. And I guess when we were coming up with that, we had no idea that we'd be privy to some kind of biological reckoning when
Right.
when the album was due to come out. But nevertheless, here we are.
Chris, I just have one last question for you, and that is, what is your favorite breakfast food?
My favorite breakfast food? Well, that's a good question. And quite odd one off topic. I don't know really. I guess being an Englishman and all, I would have to say a full English breakfast would probably be up there for me.
Awesome.
So sausages, bacon, toast, fried bread, tomatoes, scrambled eggs, those kind of things.
Yeah, sounds good. Awesome.
What
Well,
were you hoping I'd say? Pop tarts or something?
no, no, I just yeah, no. I mean, it's funny. A lot of musicians say they don't eat breakfast because they're up late touring, and so it's usually lunch before they eat. But
Yeah,
I'm
that's not the case for me, unfortunately. Like many of us in Winterfylleth are fathers now,
all
um,
right.
and I am father to a 1-year-old lad called Ralph who likes to wake up at 6 a.m. before. So I tend to eat breakfast these days
All right.
because I'm forced to be awake by my hungry young little fellow.
Awesome. Well, Chris, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me. It's been fantastic.
Thank you. No, I appreciate it, and I think we maybe read the review you did as well, and we were really happy with that. So thanks for kind of paying attention to the album and giving us your perspective on it. I think that's it always matters to us. No, I guess no matter how much musicians say they don't care about the reviews, I
Mm.
think you try not to, but equally it's nice when somebody kind of seems to feel what you were trying to say with the music, and I felt like you particularly did. So
Well, thanks.
I'm very grateful for that, and well, I hope now that you've kind of discovered the band, you maybe can appreciate some of the other stuff we've done, and dig a little bit deeper.
Oh yeah, that's definitely been my intent ever since I heard the first album, or this
Excellent.
album. Yeah, so
There's also a few kind of spin-offs from our band as well that you might be interested in. Dan, who's our guitar player, has a kind of neo-folk project called Walkinsman, which is on indie records.
okay,
Like I've got a doom metal project, which has got another album coming out in like 6 weeks on Candlelight, which is called Atavist.
awesome. Yeah,
So there's lots and lots of stuff kind of around the band that you might find some intrigue in. So yeah, thank you very much, and I've no doubt we'll speak in the future.
yeah, sounds good. Take care, Chris.
Good man. Cheers. See you.
All right, see you.
Bye, mate.